Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show, a podcast by SaaStock. Here we interview SaaS founders from around the world who've been there and done that, as they share the ins and outs of how they built their businesses, their operations, their path to securing investment, and more. Our mission with the podcast is to help you, the founder, learn how to scale your SaaS, maintain your well-being, and navigate the complexities of this ever-changing industry. I'm your host, Alex Theuma, and together we'll explore the good, the bad, and the ugly in the journey to SaaS success. Welcome back to the SaaS Revolution Show. I'm your host, Alex Theuma, CEO, founder of SaaStock and general partner of Back Future Ventures. And delighted to be joined today by Taylor Hersom, who is the CEO and founder at Eden Data. How are you doing, Taylor?
I'm living the dream on this end, Alexander. Thanks so much for having me.
Good stuff. Well, I mean, it does look like you're living the dream with the Christmas tree behind you, the dog cozied up on the sofa. Also, you're in Austin, so it's kind of a bit of my dream. You know, we mentioned this before we were recording that I wouldn't mind living in Austin. So maybe it's the hot summers that putting me off, and I haven't experienced that. But I think you're living my dream right now, Taylor.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. It's hard not to be jolly with the Christmas tree going and yeah. Being in Austin where it's a cool 60 degrees right now. This is when I don't envy the folks that are up further north.
Yeah, and good to see that you're in the Christmas spirit nice and early. I think because I've got two young kids, they made me put the tree up on the 1st of December, and now we're doing all the elf on the shelf stuff and like that. But you know, it's getting very Christmassy here at Theuma HQ.
Do you do a real tree on your end?
Do you know what we do? We've got a fake tree in the kind of the basement sort of kitchen lounge area, and then we do a real tree in the lounge on the first floor, which we don't use that lounge. It's sort of like a big sort of waste of space, really. But at Christmas, that's obviously where all the presents go, you know, under the trees, where yeah. Santa drops his presents. He comes down that chimney and leaves everything there for the children. So yeah, we probably need to sweep the chimney to make sure he can get down this year.
Amazing.
Yeah. But good stuff, Taylor. Look, I always love to ask the guests, you know, get to know the guests a little bit better, you know, at this point in the podcast. So would love to know, you know, who is Taylor Hersom?
Absolutely. So I am a born and raised Texan, Austinite actually, which is kind of rare these days. But I started my journey I went to college up in Montana, was trying to get so far away from my parents that I picked a place that I was familiar with. I have family out there, but that was far from my parents. I thought I was going to be a chef and then physical therapist. And then I ended up during my physical therapy undergrad classes, you're forced to do a business class that MIS 270. And so the professor of that class changed the trajectory of my life, got me into consulting, was the one that introduced me to the Big Four initially, got me an internship, helped me, coached me to get an internship, and then ultimately got a full-time job with Deloitte out in Portland, Oregon. So started my career by selling my soul to Deloitte, as I lovingly like to say. And I was mostly in the life sciences and healthcare space doing external audit, IT audit, and then also got a taste of cybersecurity. This was back in 2014 to 2018. And so that was when cybersecurity was starting to gain legs. And I got a lot of exposure there, which led me to my first CISO position. And then I actually quit my job. Didn't really enjoy what I was doing, didn't enjoy the person I was working for. And that was the week before COVID hit. So I ultimately started Eden Data by accident. It was mostly out of fear that my now wife was gonna smother me in my sleep because we had no income and we had just bought a house. I had just proposed and then the whole world went to hell in a handbasket. So yeah. I initially started everything that I am now doing on Upwork, and I'm sure we can nerd out on that, but that's kind of like my background. And then on the personal side, live in Austin, Texas, have 5 dogs. Wow. We've got a fairly nice sized property here that they can run around with. Had to cap my wife. She's on a rescue board and just kept bringing them home. Foster fail, as I like to say.
Okay. There's a lot of things there, and a lot of it actually I can relate to, some of it more recently and maybe some of it in the past. But I mean, where to start? I guess kind of on your the point where you quit your job, you had no income, you just kind of like proposed, or you were engaged, about to get married, mortgage on the property. I'm sure that this sort of story wouldn't be, or would resonate with a lot of founders out there. But similar, when I started SaaStock, we had a baby on the way. I kind of just quit my job. I had no income in the household, and there's me, going to my partner Gemma and just saying, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start this business. Going to leave my reasonably well paid job and that security, and start a new company. And we won't have any income for 6 months. And I think probably naturally her first response was, can you not just wait for a couple of years? And my answer was, well, no, I can't, right? Because if I don't do it, I'll never do it, or somebody else will do it. So kind of being in that position, similar to the position that you were in, and I guess ultimately taking that risk, right, is maybe that's the kind of the difference of, like, let's say, like entrepreneurs, having that, and that courage, confidence within yourself that, look, I'm going to take this risk, maybe at not the best time of my life, but when is there a good time, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's humans are inherently risk averse. So I think that the cool part is that we absolutely are also very much scrappy when it comes to when you're in a situation that is not an ideal situation. You figure out a lot of creative ways to be able to get yourself out of it. And now hindsight, of course, is 2020, and I think it's incredible. But in my particular case, transparently, I didn't think I was going to start a company. I had just quit, and I had interviews lined up that all dried up when the world ended temporarily. And so I didn't actually think I was going to be an entrepreneur. I was always a wantrepreneur, reading the books, and that was about it. But in my particular case, I was kind of forced to start making different decisions and figuring out strategy. And I think that that's also totally okay for I think that a lot of people are risk averse and think, oh, I could never do that. And I get where they're coming from.
Yeah, just on the 5 dogs thing. So it's a lot of dogs, but as you said, luckily you've got a nice property for them to run around. We've got 2, but the second one is a rescue dog. We rescued it. It was a Romanian street dog, and we rescued it from a rescue centre. It's just been with us. It's going to be 2 weeks, sort of this week.
Oh my gosh!
And settling in well. And Gemma's like, we're only getting rescue dogs, from now on. And I'm like, okay, well, let's cap it at 2 for the moment in in our current house. But it is nice, and it's very rewarding to obviously give this opportunity of a second life, a new life in a loving and caring home. So we're certainly feeling that at the moment. So
congrats!
Gizmo, as we've called him, is settling in well. Yeah. He looks a little bit like Gizmo from Gremlins. But just kind of sharing that. And so you've moved from CISO, as you called it, Chief Information Security Officer,
Nailed
right? To CEO. How was this an easy transition for you? I guess kind of like having never been a CEO before, you just got to probably learn by doing. But how has that been like for you?
Oh, you nailed it. It absolutely was not the same thing at all. I didn't feel like a lot of your inherent skills definitely come into play. Like inherently, you can either be charismatic or not charismatic, or your attention to detail or not attention to detail. But then the specific skills needed to be able to be a successful leader and build a company in the right way, I didn't have any of that figured out. It was eternal, fake it till you make it. And you go read any forum, any book, everyone says we're all faking it till we make it. But I think it didn't really resonate with me until I was actually in the thick of it and realizing, oh my gosh, I really have no idea what I'm doing. My best friend was Google, now ChatGPT, but we're eternally trying to figure out new methods. I think the most important skill set is literally just trying a bazillion things and being willing to keep trying different things.
And I know like some founders in the early days have this imposter syndrome. Maybe they kind of always have it, but like for me, and I've seen this elsewhere, like in the early days of SaaStock, I had on LinkedIn and I called myself founder, but I didn't call myself CEO because I'm like, CEO of what, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if it was sort of, similar for you, but if you look now, 4 years on since you started the business, do you feel that you've got this confidence that, look, I know what I'm doing. I'm a good CEO, getting like more confident and developing like within that role?
I would say I have more confidence today than I did 4 years ago, but I don't still feel like I am the best CEO in the world or that I have it all figured out. I still find myself with imposter syndrome sometimes wondering, am I working on the right things from day to day? What should I be working on? I don't feel like I'm adding any value today. Like, why does my company even need me? Like, those thoughts go through your head. And so figuring out what you're supposed to be doing at the current stage of your company, that was
Yep.
probably the hardest aspect that I didn't realize, is that you are a different CEO for different intervals based on how much revenue you're making, how many employees you have, and it changes and evolves constantly, but you have no one coaching you for the most part. There's a few exceptions there, but that's something that you're also dialing in as you go.
And launching like just before or like as COVID was happening, was that a help or a hindrance to you?
In hindsight, I would say it was a huge help. At the time, I thought that it was an uphill battle. It was, I would argue, harder to start a company during that period. But then there were certain aspects of COVID that allowed the world to embrace things like remote work and not needing to be in person with your customers. So coming from Deloitte, flying out every week, going to the customer in person, it suddenly became socially acceptable that you didn't need to be in person, coupled with the fact that we're selling to modern day companies like startups and scale ups. And so they are more embracive of that remote culture. That absolutely helped. It was more accepted to pay people on the internet and be okay with that.
And Eden Data, I mean, just tell us a bit about what it does, and maybe a little bit of color about the company. Like, so 4 years on, how have you grown it to kind of what size? How many people? How many customers? Anything you can share there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Eden Data is essentially your outsourced security, compliance, and or privacy team for the next generation of companies. So this is everything from small businesses, mom and pop shops, to startups, scale ups, and enterprises. But essentially, we're working to be that thought leadership in all of the security slash compliance domains to be able to help companies no matter what stage they're at in their journey, as they are building a risk management program, as they're selling to the enterprise customers of the world, as they're going public. We've been able to see a lot of different scenarios, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with the security industry, but there's just a ton of different specialties, very similar to legal, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the most part, we really want to build it to where we can have a scalable team, bringing the right expertise at the right time. You don't always need someone that is ultra good at data privacy, but you do need that as you're building out your privacy policy and as you're building out and scaling to a new country, for example. So we've built it to be a very agile service. We put it on a subscription. Our primary customer base is venture-backed startups and scale-ups, but we've got customers all over the world at this point. We have over 300 customers at this point, and they range in size, and we're doing different things for them. But in terms of employee count, I believe we just crossed the 40 mark. We also
Nice.
have a handful of contractors running around, and I'm just working to continue expanding our services. We're in our fourth year, as you mentioned, so we've done things like adding pen testing services. We've been able to add data privacy services. We're looking to see where is the industry going, especially with AI coming out.
Mm-hmm.
It is becoming, the security landscape is changing very rapidly. And so even in 2024, it's been wild to just try to remain agile and stay on top of what the world cares about today. So yeah, that's what we do in a nutshell.
And in terms of, let's say, your goals for the business, right? So you're in 4 years, you've grown it to a 40-person company with 300 customers. Like, do you want to like build this into $100 million or kind of plus company, global business? Do you want to have like a good business that's generating like good revenue and good profit? Like, how do you see this? Like, are you really going for it? Going for scale? Want to be like a market leader? It's always just interesting to know like ambitions, because I think like you see obviously people like Adam Robinson lives in kind of Austin, and He's got a nice 24 million, ARR, so like business, highly profitable, paying himself well. In that instance, and I'm sure like he does want to grow, but doesn't necessarily sort of like need to, right? And maybe I don't know. I've had him on the podcast, but
Yeah.
I can't quite sort of remember if does he want to build $100 million like bootstrap sort of like business? And certainly it's a little bit harder when you're bootstrap. But just keen to know, what you can share around there, like what your goals are with Eden Data.
It's a fantastic question, and I'm glad you asked it because it did change. I forgot to mention at the beginning, we are bootstrapped, and I had started initially on Upwork as an individual contractor, and then began transitioning customers as I started Eden Data in January of 2021. But it made it to where in the beginning I was just looking for cash flow, and as we started dialing in our services, and I realized how obsessive I am about this market, I really did see an opportunity to become that Deloitte of the for the 99%. And what I mean by that is that most businesses are not enterprise. They are those small businesses, and there's businesses popping up left and right, and they all need help with security. We have customers that have 2 employees, and yet they're selling to Walmart. And so they need to jump through a lot of security hoops. So to answer your question succinctly, I really am on track to focus on being that 9-figure company that is able to be the name brand specifically in that founder space for someone that or for an entity that you would think of as a founder when you need help with security, compliance, or privacy.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, I think you're right. And it probably is a pretty common path that your goals and objectives, kind of like change over time. And I think certainly for me, that's also been the case, right? Had ambitions, to get to a certain size. Maybe didn't always have ambitions to be like number 1 in the market, and thought, okay, it's it's okay to be like number 2. But these things can change, and like year to year, or not necessarily month to month. But yeah, always good to see, and kind of share that. And then so like you started out from using Upwork and setting the services on Upwork until now, growing this business to where it is today. Would love to maybe get some insights into you, and like how you've done that. Like, how have you grown the business? How have you acquired 300 customers in 4 years? What are some of the key learnings and insights that you can share around that?
Absolutely. So we've the security space, I think there was a little bit of a great timing impact in terms of when COVID hit and the online presence of everybody exacerbated, and then therefore the attacks associated and risks exacerbated as well. That was helpful, just simply because people started caring about security. I've been in the space since 2014, and historically enterprises were caring about security, but not really everyone else. And so one thing that really worked for us is that identifying that early trend, which is that at some point, these early stage companies and beyond are going to need to embrace some kind of security program, and they're going to need help with it. And it's not going to make sense for them to hire in-house. So just the macro of identifying that trend was really helpful. But then the other big thing that really helped me early on was simply trying multiple things that I wasn't sure were going to work or not. And what I mean by that are I hired a few different contractors to do email outreach. I started posting on LinkedIn consistently. I reached out to various companies that I think I could be a potential partner for, and tried to build relationships there. And just having that scrappy mentality of getting the no's, the classic no's, and just keeping at it, and then identifying also my competitors and figuring out what they were doing to see what was potentially working. That allowed me to at least gave me things to shine my flashlight at. And I ultimately was able to find multiple avenues that worked. One of the things about the security industry that people don't really understand is that historically most industries, in regards to sales, you can try your traditional funnels like email outreach and LinkedIn outreach, and having sales folks that are going to physical events and such. Security is very much built on trust. The entire industry is based on trust. And so therefore, most of the sales that are happening in the security industry are happening through referrals. And so I identified that early. I figured out who could I partner with, and I was able to go establish some key partnerships. And that really put us on the map. So even when it was just myself and a couple contractors, I was able to get meetings with folks simply by outreaching on LinkedIn and saying, look, I run this consulting firm. This is what we do. Would love to be able to partner with you. And I think that the other important aspect to this is that a lot of times people just expect free benefit. And so what I mean by that is if you're a founder and you're going and expecting a partner to give you leads without giving them anything in return, you're not going to make it very far. And so I try to think about what incentivizes folks. But the other important element to that is really identifying what incentivizes is the individual sending you leads. And the reason I make that clear is because a lot of times people say, well, I'm going to give a kickback to the company that I'm partnering with. That doesn't benefit the individual sales rep that's having the conversation, is them pitching your services and referring their customer to you. And so I figured out just kind of guerrilla warfare tactics of how to get people gifts, how to get them cash, how to give them some benefit, send them leads back. And I tried to go with the strategy of asking for forgiveness rather than permission. And it worked really well.
And is referrals now, like today, one of the main or the main channel for Eden Data?
It is, yeah. So we're still, I was running sales up until late last year. And so we finally built out a sales team, but still a big portion of our efforts, we focused heavily on how do we be a differentiated marketing entity and not how do we just go and ping more people on LinkedIn and email. And so we do have a sales team, but most of the opportunities are inbound. And then we're focusing heavily on how can we get great marketing material out there, make an exciting brand, not be the classic like blue, gray, white consulting firm with some guy in a business suit holding a digital globe.
Yeah.
Like we just wanted to make sure we differentiated as much as possible when people first touched our brand.
Yeah, no, I did notice that. Obviously, looking at the website before it came in, it's nice, it's slick. When you talk about like security compliance, you could, think about, say, like the blue, the gray, the enterprise kind of like traditionally sort of like boring, but it did look at pretty exciting and. When it comes to the website, so just some feedback on that. Looked a little bit different, but I think it does speak to startups and scale ups, right? And probably the customers. If you're selling to SaaS or any sort of startups in particular, I think that probably sort of like resonates for sure. And so you built out, you led sales. You've now built out a sales team. What about on the marketing side of things? Like, what does that look like on the that 4-year journey from maybe kind of when you started to now? Is there a marketing function now, and what are they doing to help bring the inbounds?
Yes, if you go look on the Wayback Machine, the marketing has changed quite a bit, but from the beginning, I very much was mindful about how can we make the brand colorful and exciting in any way possible. The marketing was largely done by me and Canva for the first year. And then we've gone through a series of marketing contractors that all helped us with incremental progress. And then now we have a CMO designated, we have multiple marketing team members, and the focus is really just putting out great content and not expecting anything in return. So just putting that thought leadership out there, that's my primary goal. Is to be the de facto expert in all things security, compliance, privacy for SaaS companies. And so we focus on how do we put out content that they actually care about today. And the way to do that is we have a bit of an unfair advantage with hundreds of customers. We get to talk to SaaS founders all day, every day, and we get to see what threats are impacting our customers. We get to see what's keeping them up at night. We get to see the inquiries they're making to our team, and that gives us data on what to talk about. And then also coupling that with what is going on in the security industry that our customers don't know about. There are plenty of threats and things happening in the background that's not in their news feed. They don't care until we tell them about it.
Just picking on that, then you mentioned about obviously having these conversations with companies, SaaS companies, SaaS founders, what's keeping them up at night. What are, like, across this year, what are some of the things that you're seeing that's keeping SaaS founders up at night? And yeah, would be interesting to hear about that a little bit. Obviously, it's not breaking confidence.
Yeah. The biggest one is really just reputational damage. A lot of them are your reputation is everything as you're growing fast and trying to make it to your next round. And when you have multiple competitors in a space, you don't want your customer or prospect Googling your name and seeing something like a data breach or a lawsuit or whatever the case may be. So that's the one that far and above folks come to us with. But the biggest thing to understand is that the startup world is quite different from the traditional business world in the sense that their risks and priorities are completely different. And what I mean by that is that if you look at a startup, they are trying to survive always. They're always in survival mode. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're looking for their next customer. They're looking for their next raise. They're looking for their product market fit. And so while you can try to sell them on fear, uncertainty, doubt, you're going to get breached. Yeah, your trade secrets are going to get stolen. They care about that, but it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's further down the chain. They care more about the things I mentioned previously. And so, how do you cater to that, and how do you help them expand their business using security rather than just making it a cost center? That's something that we're obsessive about. And startups are always looking, how can I close the next deal? Sometimes security is a blocker. So you're starting to see a huge uptick in certifications and attestations, SOC 2, ISO 27001, because those are those proverbial certificates you can put on your digital fridge and show off to the world. And so oftentimes startup founders are at least understanding that these are the things that they need, and those are the things that are keeping them up at night. They usually are contacting us and saying, I need SOC 2 yesterday. They're on a different time scale. They have different needs. So that's just an important call out for that industry. And I think it's a miss. A lot of people don't like to serve the startup market simply because they think they don't have money. It's not that. It's just that their priorities are different and people don't spend the time to try to figure that out.
There are a lot of everybody has a lot of competition, right? These days, I mean, the SaaS market, specifically, it's very saturated. So much competition, becoming a little bit commoditized. And then in the security compliance space, I think also it's been a growing space over the last couple of years. There are a number of big players, a lot of new entrants in this space as well.
Absolutely.
So there's obviously competition for Eden data as well. How do you think about competition? How do you look at differentiating, winning against maybe some of the behemoths, or I don't know if anybody's a behemoth yet, but maybe you've got your Vantas of this world, and so on and so forth. How do you see that, and what's your view?
My biggest viewpoint on this is that I think it's darn near impossible to build a moat around your business anymore. And so you have to start figuring out what are the differentiators that you can incorporate that make you stand out. And also, how can you get to the right people before your competitors do? Those are the two main areas I look at. Our biggest competitor is actually the employee. So if you think about the security industry as a whole, it's fairly new. People are getting educated on it. You know that you need to hire marketing and finance and operations and such. But with security, it's kind of it's not looked at as a needed service until it's suddenly needed. And so a lot of folks think, oh, I can just hire someone full time and then they can just be working on security all the time. It's not as simple as that. It's very similar, like I mentioned previously, to legal, where it is you have all these different specialties. So you hire a lawyer, they're not going to be able to advise you in every aspect of the legal world. And it's the same for a security professional. And so I think about that aspect of it. I also think about how do I understand my customers' needs better than my competitors? Because, and I know that seems like such a cookie cutter answer, but in reality, this industry was built on fear, uncertainty, doubt. And that is just not the way that it's going to continue to grow. That's why you're seeing the Vantas and the Dradas of the world going and selling based on helping close the next round of funding, helping close that deal by getting SOC 2 in 20 minutes or less. That's the pitch because it's working right now. And then I will say, identifying who your competitors are and who they aren't. So in the case of Vanta, for example, they complement our service. So they are the Ferrari. We work with Drata a ton. They are the Ferrari, but someone still needs to drive that Ferrari. And with the people, processes, technology triangle, you definitely need all three of those corners. And the beauty of the security industry is that you're going to need someone making decisions around strategy, and you have to incorporate it into your business, meaning that it has to align with where you're going as a company. And that's the part that we're focusing on. It's actually like kind of the unsexy aspect of the security world. And that's what I love. And so those are the areas that I want to continue to double down on.
Awesome. And getting back to something you kind of mentioned earlier, was that as you kind of built the business like during COVID, so like prior to that, but I think when you were at Deloitte, you were getting, a huge bunch of flights, visiting customers, in person. During COVID, able to do obviously everything Zoom, remotely. Now we're, out of that. What does that look like? Are you doing most of your customer, meetings, calls on Zoom, and is that what they prefer? Are you back on the plane? Are you traveling a lot, doing customer meetings? Like, how do you feel about the in-person stuff?
So in the beginning, for the first two, actually almost 3 years, travel was just not at all a thing. And so everyone just expected everything would be virtual. Now that the world has been opening back up for the last couple of years, it's certainly becoming more accepted because of the way that we operate. We typically can do everything remote. So the travel is optional, but still something that I strongly believe in. It's just so darn hard to build relationships with folks over a Zoom call. And so
Yeah.
I really do like to get on a plane and go meet with people, but I never want to be the like classic consultant that is going and just flying to customers and taking them to a fancy steak dinner and, kind of like
Yeah.
that rigmarole just of the old way of doing business. So we try to be very creative when we are getting in person, and we try to optimize for the things that move the needle the most. And a couple examples are, I just got back from presenting to a board of directors for one of our startups. We also recently went and helped a startup close a round of funding. We had to pitch security during the presentations, and those kinds of things just light me up, to be quite honest, because then we get to actually see a direct impact that we're making for the customer that we're serving. Last thing I'll say is like, I actually don't strongly believe in the whole like going to these conferences and setting up a booth and like going and throwing swag at people. I do think that there's a time and a place for those, but for the most part, it takes more to build trust specifically, and that's what our business is built on. So I look for areas that move the needle a bit more.
Makes sense. Although, given the nature of SaaStock's business, I didn't like the last part, but
It's sorry.
it's
Let
all
me
good.
actually
No, I know.
clarify though,
Yeah.
because what I mean is those move the needle a ton for
Yeah.
building relationships in general, but for security
Sure.
specifically, because
Yeah.
it is such a trust-based business, it takes a different context and setting.
Makes
Yeah,
sense.
I want to make sure I clarify there.
Makes sense. And then like looking at the business as well, thinking about the last 4 years, is there anything that you would have done differently, like with what you know now?
Oh, so many things. So first of all, like the amount of time and effort I invested in hiring and what would be a good versus a bad hire, I feel like I kind of just threw that together, and I had a lot of mistakes along the way of who would be successful here and who wouldn't. Also, just making sure that I define how someone can be successful at Eden Data. It took me a long time to start putting processes in place and getting the right, for lack of a better term, HR processes in there. And I think that kind of hindered us in some ways, or made us take a few wrong turns along the way. The other aspect is how I focus my time. There were just so many, it's easy for me to say this now. I don't think I could have figured it out at the time, but there were just so many things that I was willing to try. And I was spending all my time and effort in trying different things that there was a lot of wasted effort, and there were a lot of things that didn't work. And I just think back of like, oh my gosh, imagine where we could be if I had made the right decisions and spent my time strategically. Those are definitely areas that I feel like I quote unquote screwed up on. The last thing I would say is like, I figured out pretty early on what was working, like partnerships, and I should have doubled down on like really expanding those out rather than I almost focused on mastering like the specific service that we were doing for specific partners. And I think that we could have expanded faster if I had made relationships with more people.
Yeah, no, makes sense, and good learning shared there. And what about the last piece of advice, for listeners, for founders, for CEOs? you know, again, perhaps taken from your own experience, what would be a piece of advice you would lead to, you know, founders, SaaS founders that are building, growing their businesses today?
So I have the great pleasure of talking to many SaaS founders every day. And one thing that I still see a ton of is that people have just forgotten how to be innovative, meaning that they are getting to, I see so many founders that turn themselves into CEOs and they're just doing monotonous BS all day, every day. And they're forgetting to think about new services and try new things, and getting, they lose that scrappiness almost. And so I really, really strongly encourage everyone that I talk to designate time and designate your kind of internal counsel for always maintaining what got you to be successful in the first place, which is always challenging how you do business today, doing the classic like Airbnb example of how can we give a 5-star to a 10-star experience to our customers. Like I think that a lot of that happens in BS meetings, for lack of a better term, that just check a box and people forget how to be innovative. And with the world changing in the way that it is, I certainly think that we can no longer just be the company that just stays the same on a 5-year interval or even a 3-year interval. I think we have to evolve every year. And so that would be the piece of advice I would give.
No, love that. Great advice. Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. So a really great point to end on. But Taylor, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you online? Where can they find Eden Data?
Absolutely. So LinkedIn is our main spot, and then I am on X as well. But those are the main areas you can follow along on our journey. And Alexander, I can't thank you enough for giving me the opportunity to speak today.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Taylor Hersom, for joining me on the SaaS Revolution Show. Really enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully see you in Austin soon.
It was an honor. Thank you.